"You're a loser, Dad." My son scoffed, mocking my post-retirement plan to start a bistro. A few months later, as my bistro flourished, he came to me asking for work, defeated, penniless, and desperate. I looked at him, remembering his betrayal, and gave a one-word answer: number. Arthur's dream was more than a bistro. It was his vindication. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. And I couldn't care less what you think of my age. Arthur's voice trembled as he dropped the binder on the kitchen counter. Coffee spilled from David's cup, leaving a dark ring on the meticulously organized proposal. David was frozen, halfway through taking off his coat, his attaché case still in his right hand. "Dad, what is all this?" "I want to start a bistro." The words rushed out before Arthur could have second thoughts. "I know it seems absurd at my age, but I've been planning this for months. Just look." His weathered hands shook slightly as he laid out the pages on the worn vinyl tabletop. Financial forecasts, menu concepts, notes on potential locations, everything he had researched during those long, sleepless March nights. The binder's spine was creased from being opened so many times. David's case fell to the floor with a heavy thud. "You have completely lost your grip in your old age. This is absolute insanity." "Insanity?" Arthur's voice rose sharply. "I've wanted this my entire life. I have the savings, I have the strategy, and I definitely have the time. Dad, you're 67. People your age are supposed to be on the golf course, not launching new ventures." David grabbed a projection sheet, glancing over it with a scornful expression. "Where did you get these fantasy numbers?" "From actual research, from real financial institutions, from commercial realtors." Arthur snatched the page from his hand. "I spoke with all of them this week. It all adds up." The kitchen was silent aside from the low hum of the refrigerator. David's expression hardened from bewilderment to something more calculating. He pulled a chair out and sat down. "How much are we talking about?" "A loan for $175,000. I'm putting $35 down from my retirement fund." "Your fund?" David's voice became a menacing whisper. "Dad, that's supposed to last you for the rest of your life. What will you do when this pipe dream goes under and you're left with nothing?" A flush of anger rose in Arthur's chest. "It won't go under. I've considered every possible angle. Come on, I'll show you the spot." Against all his better judgment, David found himself getting into his father's old Ford sedan. The drive to Elm Avenue took 15 minutes, winding through familiar Oakwood suburbs. Neither of them spoke as they drove by the park where David had played soccer as a boy. The grocery store where Arthur still did his weekly shopping. The vacant storefront was wedged between a dry cleaner and an accounting firm. Flakes of paint were peeling from its brick exterior like a bad sunburn. The grimy windows only reflected their own strained faces. "Here it is," Arthur declared, taking a set of keys from his coat. "The agent let me have these for a few days." David trailed his father into the cramped space. Inside, dust motes floated in the afternoon sun, filtering through the streaked glass. The air was stale with the smell of neglect and failed ambitions. "It's the perfect size for 25 tables," Arthur said, his voice bouncing off the bare drywall. "Kitchen area in the rear, storage on the second floor. I've already spoken to builders about renovations." David paced the room, pointing out the water damage on the ceiling, electrical outlets that looked like they were from the 1970s, and floors that needed a total overhaul. Every few steps uncovered another costly issue. "Dad, this is a wreck. You'd burn through your entire loan just to get it up to code." "Every enterprise starts from nothing. Colonel Sanders didn't start with a palace." "Colonel Sanders wasn't almost 70 when he started." David's patience finally ran out. "This isn't some feel-good movie where the old man beats the odds. This is the real world, where restaurants go out of business every single day, where people gamble away everything chasing impossible dreams." Arthur's hands balled into fists. "So I should just quit? Sit in my armchair and wait to die?" "You should be sensible. Consider your future. Consider us. What about Mom's memory when you squander everything we worked so hard to build? The mention of Helen was a gut punch. Arthur's wife had passed away 3 years prior, leaving a home filled with her memory and a husband who had stopped dreaming. Until this moment. "You will not bring your mother into this," Arthur hissed. "She would have been behind me." She always was. Mom was a realist. She would have talked you out of this madness. David gestured around the dilapidated room. "This isn't a strategy. It's a reckless bet with our family's financial security." The ride home was thick with a toxic quiet. David's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he pulled into his father's driveway. The engine ticked as it cooled, counting down to an inevitable explosion. "Dad, I'm only saying this because I care. Give up on this bistro idea. Enjoy being retired. Go on a cruise. Learn to fish. Do something suited for your age." "Suited for my age?" Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. "You mean wait for death so you can get what's left?" "That isn't what I meant, and you know it." "Is it?" Arthur swiveled in his seat to look at his son. "You're a failure. You'll never pull this off. Don't you dare lose my inheritance on this idiotic bistro." The words hung between them, sharp and cold. David's mouth fell open, then shut. The color drained from his face. "Get out of my car," Arthur said softly, "and don't come back without an apology." "Dad, Get out." David hesitated, then opened the door. He walked to his own car without looking back. From the kitchen window, Arthur watched the taillights vanish into the deepening March twilight. The business proposal was still on his table, stained with coffee but otherwise whole. Ambitions, it turned out, were hardier than family ties. The sound of David's car faded away. Arthur shut the front door, turning the deadbolt with more force than was needed. His hand rested on the cool lock for a long moment. Listening to his own breath in the now silent house, he collected the papers from the table, carefully smoothing out each wrinkled, coffee-stained page. Every calculation and projection was the result of hours of diligent work. David's scorn couldn't invalidate the effort that had gone into this dream. The living room felt empty as Arthur sank into his worn armchair. The chair had been Helen's pick 2 decades ago, chosen for its comfort after his long shifts at the assembly plant. Now it held him like an old companion as he reached for the photo albums on the end table. Old photographs stirred memories he had nearly let go. There he was at 25, in a crisp white apron at the local community college's culinary arts program. Helen was next to him, beaming and pregnant with David, her hand on her growing belly. That was 1983, the year his path changed. He was just 2 semesters from finishing when Helen's morning sickness became debilitating. Medical bills mounted as her part-time job became impossible to maintain. Someone had to bring in a steady income, and that fell to him. "I'll finish school later," he had told Helen when he accepted the job at the plant. "After the baby is here, after we're on our feet." Later never arrived. There were diapers to purchase, a mortgage to pay, a college fund to build. The dream of his own place was put away like old holiday decorations, brought out to be looked at once in a while, but never actually used. 43 years at the plant. 43 years of heavy machinery, rigid schedules, and the reliable paychecks that created the life David was now so desperate to protect. He had always told himself every sacrifice was justified. The album slid from his grasp as sleep overtook him. He awoke at 6:15 a.m. to the sound of birds outside his window. March sunlight streamed through the curtains Helen had sewn, painting familiar patterns on the floor. The coffee maker gurgled as Arthur showered and put on clean jeans and his favorite flannel. His morning ritual felt different, full of potential rather than routine. Today was for taking action, not for dwelling on deferred dreams. He took the phone book from a kitchen drawer and laid it open next to his breakfast. Oakwood Citizens Bank was first on his list, followed by several other local banks, the Downtown Small Business Administration Office, and 2 firms specializing in commercial real estate. Good morning, Oakwood Citizens Bank. This is Sandra speaking. Hello, Sandra. My name is Arthur Vance. I need to make an appointment about a small business loan. Of course, Mr. Vance. What kind of business are you planning to open? A bistro. Classic American food with some Italian flair. The words sounded solid, self-assured. I have a full business plan prepared for review. Sandra's keyboard clicked on the other end. I have a spot next Thursday at 9:30 a.m. with our loan officer, Ms. Evans. Would that time work for you? Perfect. Arthur wrote it down in his planner with a steady hand. What paperwork will I need to bring? The call lasted 15 minutes. Tax returns for the past 3 years, bank statements, credit history, detailed financial forecasts. Arthur jotted notes in the margins of his plan, making a checklist for his presentation. The next call was to the Small Business Administration. A pre-recorded message offered details on loan guarantees, startup grants, and free mentorship services. Arthur wrote down 3 phone numbers and 2 websites. The real estate agent was next. The man who had given him the keys to the Elm Avenue location answered immediately. Mr. Peterson, this is Arthur Vance. We viewed the bistro space yesterday. Of course. Did you decide to make an offer? I'm securing the financing now. Could you send over the full property specs and recent comparable sales in the area? I'll get that emailed to you this afternoon. The owner is very eager to sell, especially to someone with your restaurant background. Arthur didn't bother correcting his assumption. 43 years in manufacturing had taught him about deadlines, quality assurance, and meeting expectations. Those skills were transferable. By lunchtime, his notebook held a timeline stretching from March to September, loans secured by early April, property closed by mid-April, renovations until July, hiring in August, and a grand opening in September. Each step had its own set of tasks and deadlines. The plan felt tangible now, a real business venture with achievable goals and sound projections, not just a retirement hobby. David's insults echoed in his mind, but they felt less potent in the light of day. I'll show you, son, who the real loser is, Arthur muttered as he closed the notebook. He went to his bedroom and opened the closet Helen had kept so meticulously organized. His best suit was in a protective garment bag, a dark gray with faint pinstripes. He had bought it for David's college graduation and worn it to Helen's funeral. Now it would be used for a happier occasion. The suit fit surprisingly well. 3 years of mourning had trimmed 15 pounds from his frame, but the fine tailoring was still apparent under the looser fit. He straightened his tie in the mirror, practicing the self-assured smile he would present at the bank. Arthur Vance, proprietor, he said to his own reflection. The title felt strange, but not out of reach. Thursday couldn't arrive soon enough, but he had 3 more days to prepare, 3 more days to make sure nothing could stand in the way of his long-overdue dream. David's absence felt more like liberation than loss. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the kitchen windows as Arthur went back to his business plan. Every page had to be perfect. Every number had to be rechecked. Success demanded perfection, and perfection required the one thing he finally had: time. Deferred dreams, he was realizing, weren't always denied. Sometimes they were just waiting for the right time to flourish. 5 days of intense preparation had all been for this moment. Arthur straightened his tie one last time before entering Oakwood Citizens Bank. The lobby had the scent of fresh-cut flowers and ambition, and its granite floors were polished to a high shine. He held his father's old briefcase, which was now packed with the documents that could redefine his future. Mr. Vance? A woman in her mid-40s approached him with her hand extended. I'm Sandra Evans, the commercial loan officer. It's a pleasure to meet you. Miss Evans's office was professional, but not intimidating. Diplomas from Oakwood State University and banking certifications were framed on one wall. Her desk was tidy, with a computer, organized stacks of files, and a mug that read, "World's Best Mom." Please have a seat, Miss Evans said, motioning to a comfortable chair. "I hear you're looking to open a bistro." "That's right." Arthur opened his briefcase with composed hands. "I've brought a detailed business plan for you to look at." The next 30 minutes were spent in a careful presentation. Arthur outlined his concept for Arthur's Place, a neighborhood bistro focused on American comfort food with Italian influences. He went over his target demographic, market analysis, and revenue forecasts with the confidence of someone who had done his homework. Miss Evans listened closely, jotting down notes and asking sharp questions about startup costs, overhead, and his break-even point. Her pen moved swiftly across a yellow legal pad, capturing the details that would shape his future. "Your financial models seem quite sound," she commented, looking over his spreadsheets. "How much are you applying for?" $175,000. I'm contributing $35,000 of my own savings for the down payment." "And what are you offering as collateral?" "My house. It's valued at roughly $250,000, and there's no mortgage on it." Arthur slid the property appraisal across the desk. "I've owned it free and clear for 12 years. Miss Evans's eyebrows went up slightly. "Mr. Vance, at your age, this is a significant risk. Most institutions prefer to lend to borrowers with a longer career path ahead of them." "I've dreamed of this my whole life." "It's now or never," Arthur said, meeting her gaze. "I have 43 years of work history, a stellar credit score, and more drive than most people half my age." "Your credit is indeed excellent," she confirmed, glancing at her monitor. "An 820 score, no missed payments, no debt other than standard utilities. But we will require substantial collateral for a loan of this size. The house covers it, and I have a steady pension of $3,500 a month." Miss Evans produced a loan application that was 3 inches thick. "If you want to move forward, we'll need these forms filled out, plus your tax returns from the last 3 years, all of your bank statements, and verification of your pension." Arthur reached into his briefcase and took out a thick folder. "It's all right here. I made extra copies." For the next hour, they went through every document. The tax returns showed a modest but steady income. The bank statements painted a picture of a man who was frugal and saved diligently. His pension was verified from his 43 years at the plant. "This is exceptionally well prepared," Ms. Evans remarked. "Most of our applicants need several appointments to pull all this together. I like to be prepared." Arthur signed his name on the preliminary application. "When do you think I'll have a decision?" "Provided the home appraisal matches your stated value, we should have an answer for you in 10 to 14 business days. The loan committee convenes every Tuesday." Miss Evans escorted him to the lobby and shook his hand warmly. "Mr. Vance, I'll be frank. This application is going to get a serious look. Your financial prudence and thoroughness are very impressive." Outside in the parking lot, Arthur sat in his Ford for a few minutes, letting it all sink in. The preliminary approval felt real in his hands, even if the final decision was still weeks away. Miss Evans's words had been genuine encouragement, not just professional courtesy. He took out his phone and called the real estate agent. "Mr. Peterson, it's Arthur Vance. I've just come from the bank with a preliminary loan approval. Can we arrange another look at the Elm Avenue property this afternoon?" "Of course. Is 3 o'clock good for you?" "Perfect. And Mr. Peterson, I'm prepared to make an offer." Arthur started the car and pulled out of the bank's parking lot. In his rearview mirror, he saw Miss Evans's second-floor office window. She was likely already entering his details into the system, starting the process that would turn his lifelong dream into a reality. The radio played smooth jazz as he drove through downtown Oakwood toward home. Every building and street corner looked different now, part of a community where he might soon be a business owner, not just a retiree. At a red light, he picked up his phone again. David's number was still in his contacts, untouched since their fight 5 days ago. His thumb hovered over the call button. Not yet. First, he needed the final loan approval, then to close on the property, then the renovations. David would see the proof before he heard any more words. Actions would speak louder than any apology or justification. The light turned green, and Arthur drove on, with the windows rolled down and hope in the passenger seat. Dreams, he was learning, had their own schedule, and his was just getting started. 8 days had gone by since his meeting at the bank. The loan approval letter felt warm in Arthur's pocket as he stood in front of the run-down storefront that would soon belong to him. Karen Bell, the real estate agent, glanced at her watch and gave him a professional smile. "Right on schedule, mister. Vance ready to make it official?" Arthur nodded, pulling at the lapels of his gray suit. He had thought of nothing else for over a week, but now that the keys were about to be his, the moment felt almost dreamlike. "This place has a lot of potential," Karen said, as she unlocked the door. "The last owner had an antique store here for 15 years. It has good bones, a solid structure." Sunlight poured through the dirty windows, lighting up dust motes that danced in the still air. Arthur walked the space again, looking beyond the current state of decay to the vision he had held for so long. "The electrical was brought up to code in 2018, Karen went on, opening a circuit box to reveal modern wiring. "The plumbing is sound, though you'll need commercial-grade sinks for a restaurant. The upstairs storage is a big plus." Arthur traced his fingers over the worn countertop, where an old cash register had once rung up sales for forgotten objects. Soon, this space would be serving coffee and hearty meals to neighbors who would become his patrons. "I see an opportunity here, not a ruin," he said, mostly to himself. Karen laid out the closing papers on a makeshift table near the front window. The purchase agreement, deed, proof of insurance, and utility transfer forms. Each signature brought him one step closer to ownership. "The final price is $95,000, Karen confirmed, giving the documents one last review. "Your loan covers the purchase and the closing costs. Everything looks to be in order." Arthur signed his name with a steady hand, feeling as though 7 decades of dreaming were finally taking legal form. The pen felt heavy and significant, a tool for shaping his own future. "Congratulations, you are now the owner." Karen gave him a brass ring holding 3 keys, front door, back door, and the upstairs storage. "The building is all yours." The metal was cold in his hand, but its weight brought a warmth that filled his chest. These keys were for more than just doors. They were for possibilities he had thought were long gone. "Any words of wisdom for a new entrepreneur?" Arthur asked as Karen gathered her paperwork. "Have a solid plan, but be ready to adapt. Oakwood could use more locally owned eateries. The community will embrace you if you serve them well." After Karen was gone, Arthur stood alone in his bistro, the legal owner for the first time. The quiet was like a familiar, comforting blanket. Every mark on the floor, every crack in the plaster, was now his. He walked to the back, pacing out the kitchen space. A commercial fridge would go there, the grill against that wall, and prep counters along the windows. The layout he had carried in his mind for months now had a home. His phone buzzed. It was a text from the bank confirming the funds had been transferred. His account balance reflected the loan, making it official in the digital world as well as on paper. Outside, cars drove down Elm Avenue as people went about their afternoon shopping. Soon, the smell of coffee and good food would be coming from his place. The idea sent a jolt of energy through him. The dust motes continued their dance in the sunbeams, but now they were in Arthur's space, under his ownership, inside his realized dream. Tomorrow would be for contractors, permits, and the endless details of turning potential into profit. But this moment was for quiet contentment and the solid feel of the keys in his hand. Keys in hand, dreams took shape, his very own place. 5 days of solitary work had fallen into a pattern. Arthur would show up each morning with coffee and cleaning gear, losing himself in the task of reclaiming the space. He stretched measuring tape across the floor to mark out table placements and used rags to reveal the original hardwood under years of grime. He was on his knees by the front window, scraping away old paint, when he saw a familiar figure approaching on the sidewalk. Arthur looked up through the grimy glass and saw David's silhouette, his shoulders tense with anger. The front door flew open. "Dad, you've gone off the deep end. You have to back out of this." David stood in the doorway in his business suit, his briefcase clutched in his hand. His face held the same rage from their argument in March, now amplified by a sense of betrayal. "Hello, son." Arthur got to his feet slowly, his joints aching from hours on the hard floor. "I didn't expect to see you." "I found the bank statements on your counter." $95,000. You really bought this dump. Cleaning supplies went flying as David kicked a bucket. Soapy water spread across the concrete, reflecting the overhead lights like shattered promises. "This is my decision, son, and you can't stop me." "Your decision?" David's voice was filled with disbelief. "You've risked your entire future on this fantasy. What happens when it fails? Where are you going to live when the bank forecloses on the house?" Arthur put down his scraper and turned to face his son. 5 days of hard work had only hardened his resolve. Every clean surface and measured corner was proof that his dream was viable. "I'm not going to fail. Look around you. I'm making real progress with a real plan. This bistro will be a success." "Success?" David gestured at the peeling paint and broken light fixtures. "You're 67 years old trying to go up against established places. You don't have any experience running a business. I have 43 years of work experience and more resolve than most people half your age. Resolve doesn't pay the bills when you have no customers. Resolve doesn't cover your liability when someone gets sick from your food." The cruel words hung in the air, making both of them fall silent. David was breathing hard, nearly hyperventilating, while Arthur remained calm in the face of the verbal attack. "You're afraid," Arthur said softly. "Afraid that I might actually pull this off without your approval. I'm afraid you're going to lose everything you and Mom built. The house, your savings, your security, all thrown away on some childish whim." "Don't you bring your mother into this again?" Arthur's voice dropped to a low growl. "Helen would have wanted me to be happy, not tried to dictate my life." David took out his phone and started to dial. "I'm calling Doctor Miller. Maybe he can make you see reason about what's age appropriate. Put the phone down. Someone has to step in before you ruin your life." Arthur crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched the phone out of David's hand. His son's eyes widened in shock at the sudden action. "This discussion is over." "Get off my property." "Your property?" David let out a bitter laugh. "This derelict building that's going to drive you into bankruptcy?" "My property that is going to prove every single doubt you've ever had about me wrong." They glared at each other, the distance between them growing with every word. David adjusted his tie and picked up his briefcase with an air of superiority. "We'll see about your grand plan. When this fantasy of yours comes crashing down, don't come asking me for help." "I wouldn't dream of it." David walked to the door, then turned for a parting shot. "Mom would be ashamed of you." The words were meant to hurt, but Arthur stood his ground. "Your mother would be proud that I finally found the courage to pursue my dreams instead of just getting by." A car door slammed outside. The sound of an engine faded into the afternoon traffic. Arthur was alone again, surrounded by cleaning supplies and the lingering echo of cruel words that couldn't change the fact of his ownership. He picked up the overturned bucket and went back to scraping paint off the window frames. Work, he had discovered, was the best cure for family strife. Tomorrow, the contractors and permits would come. Success would be his only argument. The next morning, Arthur was at the bistro before dawn, David's threats ringing in his ears like a challenge he was ready to accept. City Hall opened at 8 o'clock, and he intended to be the first person in line for the permits that would make his dream a legal reality. April 10th was the start of a period of organized chaos. Permit forms covered his kitchen table at night, and construction dust covered his clothes during the day. He measured his progress in signed applications and passed inspections. Next, please. The clerk at City Hall had seen dozens of applications that week, but none as meticulously prepared as Arthur's. Every form was filled out in neat print, and all the required documents were organized in labeled folders: a food service license, a business operating permit, health department approval. Arthur handed over the packet he had spent 3 days putting together, along with fire safety certifications and signage permits. 2 weeks of navigating bureaucracy resulted in a thick manila envelope of approved paperwork. Each stamp brought him closer to opening day and proved to his doubters that preparation was more important than age. The contractors arrived the next Monday. George Miller had renovated a dozen restaurants in Oakwood over 2 decades, and his team knew the unique demands of a commercial kitchen. "We'll need to upgrade the electrical for your equipment," George explained, looking over Arthur's plans. "Commercial-grade refrigerators, gas hookups for the grill, and a proper ventilation system to meet health codes. Everything has to be perfect. This is my dream." "We'll make it perfect, Mr. Vance. Your September opening date looks very achievable." Daily site visits became Arthur's new norm. He arrived every morning to let the work crews in, and then watched their progress with the same eye for detail that 43 years in manufacturing had taught him. Quality control was essential, whether you were building machinery or building a dream. The space slowly transformed. New electrical panels were installed to handle the commercial appliances, and updated plumbing was put in for the multiple sinks. Fresh coats of warm paint, deep reds and rich yellows, covered the old, faded walls. "Are you hiring?" A woman approached him in the 3rd week as he was sweeping up construction debris. She was in her mid-30s and dressed professionally, but he could see the worry in her eyes. "As a matter of fact, I am Jessica Torres." She offered her hand. "I heard a new restaurant was opening up." Arthur Vance. "Tell me about your experience." Jessica's 8 years in the food service industry were evident in the way she talked about menu timing, customer service, and inventory control. More importantly, her motivation was clear. "I need this job. I have a family to provide for." There was no begging, just a statement of fact delivered with dignity. "When can you start?" The next week, Kevin Lee, a 22-year-old fresh out of culinary school, came in with an energy that reminded Arthur of his own youthful passion. "I've always wanted to work in the restaurant industry." Kevin's excitement filled the room as he talked about his training and his desire to gain practical experience. By the end of the month, all the equipment was installed. The commercial refrigerators hummed, and the 6-burner gas stove was ready for its first use. Tables and chairs from a restaurant supply store arrived, turning the construction site into an actual bistro. Evenings were spent developing the menu. Arthur's vision of comfort food with an Italian twist came to life with the help of Kevin's formal training and Jessica's real-world experience. "Chicken parmesan with a side of polenta," Kevin suggested as they went over their test recipes. "Classic meatloaf with garlic mashed potatoes. Familiar dishes with a unique spin." "The prices have to be affordable for families," Jessica added. "Oakwood isn't Crestwood Heights. People want good food they can afford." On March 31st, Arthur stood in the transformed space, surrounded by his small team and the results of months of hard work. The whiteboard they had just installed showed May 20th as their opening day. Everything was in place except for the customers. Opening day dawned with the same bright spring sun that had shone on every day of preparation. By 7 a.m., Arthur's place was ready for its first patrons. Fresh flowers sat in the window boxes, and the scent of Kevin's test batch of breakfast muffins wafted through the immaculate dining room. I checked the coffee maker for the 20th time that morning. Every last detail had to be flawless: the polished countertops, the perfectly aligned salt and pepper shakers, the menus placed just so at each table. Jessica arrived in her new uniform, her face beaming with professional pride despite the anxiety I could see in her eyes. "Everything looks amazing, Mr. Vance," she said, tying her apron with an expert flick of her wrists. "First days are always tough, but we're prepared." Kevin came out of the kitchen with a tray of breakfast samples, his energy contagious even at that early hour. Steam rose from fresh-baked scones and perfectly fluffy scrambled eggs, and strips of bacon were arranged in neat rows, like soldiers ready for inspection. "Tomorrow will be different, you'll see," he declared, though I hadn't said a word about my doubts. His culinary school optimism was still intact, unfazed by the sight of the empty tables before us. By 8 o'clock, the morning rush I had planned for had become the morning wait. Jessica wiped down counters that were already spotless, while Kevin fussed over food displays that were already perfect. I stood by the front window, watching people walk by without so much as a glance at our new sign. "Maybe they just don't know we're open yet," Jessica offered, but her voice lacked conviction. 9 o'clock came and went with the same result. People on their way to work, carrying their own coffee cups. Students heading to the nearby campus, their backpacks full of books, but with no appetite for what we were offering. The cash register was as silent as a graveyard. Kevin continued to cook, determined to have fresh food ready for when the customers finally showed up. Pancakes, omelets, home fries, a full breakfast that could have fed 30 people. The aroma alone should have been drawing in crowds, but Elm Avenue was indifferent. "The lunch crowd will be different," I told myself, checking the clock for the 100th time. "Professionals need a quick place to eat. Families want an affordable option." Jessica nodded, but I saw her steal a glance at the empty tip jar. She had a family to support, bills that wouldn't wait for our bistro to be discovered. 11 o'clock arrived, and with it, lunch prep, but there were no lunch customers. Kevin had made enough food for a packed house, but we served a grand total of 0 meals. The pristine dining room seemed to mock us with its perfect emptiness. Maybe David was right. The words slipped out before I could catch them. "Don't say that," Jessica replied firmly. "It takes time for a new place to build a customer base. Rome wasn't built in a day." But Rome's builders probably had clients, I thought grimly. They probably hadn't staked their life savings on a dream no one else wanted to be a part of. 2 o'clock was when the afternoon shift was supposed to start, if we had needed one. Instead, the three of us stood in our beautiful, empty bistro like actors, playing to an empty theater. The coffee went cold in the carafes, and the lunch specials grew dry under the heat lamps. "Should we just close up for the day?" Kevin asked, his morning cheerfulness finally worn down by the reality of the situation. "No." The word came out more sharply than I had intended. "We stay open until 6 o'clock, just like we planned." A professional establishment keeps its hours, but professionalism felt pointless when there was no profit and our purpose seemed to be misguided. Every dollar spent on food, every hour of prep time, every bit of hope I had invested in this place felt wasted on a town that had no interest in Arthur's Place. 6 o'clock felt like a final judgment. I locked the front door while Jessica and Kevin cleaned equipment that had barely been touched. The day's total earnings were exactly $0.00. "Same time tomorrow?" Jessica asked, her professional tone tinged with uncertainty. "Same time tomorrow," I confirmed, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. Standing outside my bistro, looking through the window at the empty tables, I couldn't help but wonder if David's grim forecast was coming true. Maybe some deferred dreams were, in fact, denied. The keys felt much heavier in my hand than they had the day I bought the place. The next morning brought the same sunny weather, but Arthur's optimism had faded to a sense of duty. I unlocked the bistro doors with less excitement and more resignation than I had felt on our grand opening day. Jessica was there right on time, despite the previous day's disappointment. Her dedication meant the world to me, especially when my own belief was wavering. Kevin came in through the back with his energy restored, convinced that yesterday was just a fluke. "Second day nerves," he announced. "It happens to the best of us." I wished I could share his confidence, but the empty till from yesterday spoke louder than his positive attitude. We got ready for another day of making beautiful food for no one, another day of proving David right. At 8:15, our first customer walked in. "You're finally open. We've been waiting for this." An elderly man came through the door, followed by his wife, who walked slowly but had a look of genuine excitement on her face. "Good morning," I managed to say, surprised by how strange it felt to use my customer service voice after a day of silence. "Coffee for two, please, and whatever that delicious smell is." The woman found a booth in the corner while her husband came up to the counter. Kevin emerged from the kitchen with plates of fresh breakfast, his morning's work finally finding its audience. Jessica poured coffee with a steady hand, her professional poise restored by the presence of actual customers. Before I could even process what was happening, more people came in, a young mother with 2 toddlers, 3 men in suits discussing business over newspapers, a college student who claimed a window seat with her laptop. "Excuse me." I picked up the ringing phone while Jessica took orders, and Kevin kept up with the growing demand from the kitchen. "Arthur's Place, how can I help you?" "Oh, I am so incredibly sorry. I got the dates wrong on the advertisement." Emily Davis, our marketing consultant, sounded deeply embarrassed. "I accidentally put June 12th instead of June 11th on all the flyers. Yesterday was supposed to be a soft launch, but everyone thought today was the official opening." A wave of relief washed over me. It wasn't our concept, our food, or our location. A simple typo had cost us our opening day, but it hadn't doomed our business. "Thank you for letting me know," I said, watching Jessica expertly handle 3 tables at once while Kevin sent out plate after plate of hot food. "We're managing." By 10 o'clock, every table was full. The sound of conversation filled the dining room, the very sound I had imagined for months. Happy customers talking about our menu, families enjoying a meal together, business people planning their day over our coffee. "Order up," Kevin called from the kitchen, his culinary training finally being put to the test. Plates moved from the kitchen to the tables with growing speed, and our cash register rang with one sale after another. Jessica glided between tables, refilling coffee and clearing plates as customers complimented the food and the service. Tips began to pile up in her jar, a tangible validation of all our hard work. "Best eggs Florentine and Oakwood," one customer told his friend. "This place is going to be a hit." A hit was an understatement. By noon, there was a line out the door. People were willing to wait for a table at the restaurant that couldn't get a single customer the day before. "We need more help," Jessica whispered, during a brief moment of calm. "We need more everything," I replied, watching Kevin juggle 6 different orders at once without compromising on quality. The lunch rush bled into the afternoon as a steady stream of new patrons came in. Students loved our affordable prices, and retirees enjoyed the comfortable atmosphere and big portions. At the end of the day, I counted the receipts with hands that shook from exhaustion, not fear. Our first real day had brought in enough to cover our costs and even turn a small profit. Better yet, the customer feedback suggested we could expect a lot of repeat business. "Same time tomorrow?" Jessica asked, but this time her question was filled with excitement. "Same time tomorrow," I confirmed, and I meant it. Standing in my successful bistro, surrounded by the proof of community support and a viable business, I finally realized that dreams weren't about proving doubters wrong. They were about creating something of value that people genuinely wanted. Tomorrow would have its own challenges, but tonight was for celebrating. 18 days of consistent success had turned the bistro from a risky venture into a local favorite. Arthur had settled into a routine of morning prep, a hectic lunch service, and evening cleanup that felt as natural as breathing. A feature in the local paper and glowing online reviews kept a steady flow of new faces coming in, while our regulars had their established routines. The elderly couple took their corner booth every morning, college students filled the afternoons, and business lunches provided a reliable midday rush. I was wiping down the counter during our busiest time when David walked in. Every table was full, Jessica was taking orders, and Kevin was expertly managing the kitchen. Success was our shield. "Dad." David's voice cut through the cheerful noise of the restaurant. He was wearing his formal business suit despite the warm weather, and he carried a briefcase that made it clear this was not a social call. "David," I said, continuing to wipe the counter, "we're a little busy right now." "I can see that." His voice was tinged with disapproval, not pride. "Actually, that's why I'm here." He came up to the counter holding his briefcase like a shield. Patrons at the nearby tables sensed the tension, and their conversations quieted. "You need a psychiatric evaluation." David put a thick folder on the clean counter. "These papers need your signature." Inside the folder, on official letterhead, were competency assessment forms, financial decision-making evaluations, and medical examination requests. Documents that questioned my sanity and my ability to manage my own life. What is this? But I knew. I could feel the solid ground I had built for myself starting to crumble. It's to protect the family's assets. You've shown poor financial judgment, and these evaluations will give us the legal grounds to step in. The restaurant went completely silent. Jessica stopped writing down an order, and Kevin appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the sudden tension. "You want to take everything from me," I said, my voice louder than I intended, carrying across the room full of witnesses to this family drama. "I want to stop any further financial irresponsibility. This restaurant is proof that you're incapable of making rational choices. This restaurant is proof that I'm more capable than you ever gave me credit for." David gestured dismissively at the packed dining room, at the evidence of success that flew in the face of his dire predictions. A stroke of luck doesn't change fundamental incompetence. When this place fails, and it will, you'll have nothing left. The legal papers felt heavy in my hands, their implications reaching far beyond a family dispute. Competency hearings could lead to a conservatorship, with my finances turned over to a relative who saw my dream as a sign of mental instability. "I will never sign this. You have crossed a line. You don't have to sign. These assessments can be court-ordered based on your demonstrated financial recklessness." Jessica approached the counter, clearly uncomfortable, but concerned for me. Customers started to get up and leave, not wanting to be part of the escalating confrontation. "Mr. Vance?" Jessica's voice was a quiet question of whether she should intervene. "It's all right, Jessica. My son is just leaving." "This isn't finished, Dad. You'll see, I was trying to protect you when the bankruptcy papers are filed." David snapped his briefcase shut, the clicks echoing in the now quiet restaurant. He walked to the door as my staff and remaining customers watched. "Your mother would be ashamed of you," I called after him, wanting to hurt him. "Mom would have put a stop to this insanity before it began," he retorted without looking back. The door closed behind him, a final declaration of war. The legal documents lay on my counter as a few customers tried to resume their meals. Jessica began to clear the empty tables while Kevin retreated to the kitchen. Standing behind the counter of my successful bistro, surrounded by proof of my competence, I felt the weight of a legal threat that could take it all away. Success, it seemed, had made me a more tempting target than failure ever did. Papers on the counter, customers watching, dreams under attack. The legal documents David had left became fuel for Arthur's resolve. Within days of their confrontation, he was approached by 3 investors who had heard about his success at Chamber of Commerce events. There was a prime piece of real estate in downtown Oakwood that had seemed out of reach 6 months ago. Now, with a proven track record and solid financials, I negotiated a lease for a corner spot with 3 times the foot traffic of Elm Avenue. The rent was higher, but the corporate lunch crowd would more than make up for it. "How did you manage to achieve this level of success?" Megan Clark from the Oakwood Business Journal leaned in with her recorder, genuinely curious about my story. "The secret is a combination of dreams and hard work," I replied. surprised at how comfortable I had become with these interviews. Age doesn't cloud your vision, it sharpens it. Jessica was promoted to assistant manager, overseeing both locations, while Kevin designed a catering menu for local businesses. We hired 6 new employees who brought an energy that transformed our small eatery into a legitimate enterprise. The downtown grand opening was attended by city council members, local news personalities, and business leaders who wouldn't have known my name 6 months prior. The ribbon-cutting ceremony felt surreal for a man who had been dismissed as a delusional dreamer. "You've shown all of us what's possible," Jessica said at a staff meeting, as we reviewed reports showing a 40% monthly revenue increase. "Your success gives everyone hope." The media coverage brought me recognition beyond Oakwood. I was nominated for Senior Entrepreneur of the Year, invited to speak at local colleges, and asked to mentor other aspiring business owners over 60. My story was proof that retirement could be a new beginning, not an end. The original location kept its cozy neighborhood feel, while the downtown spot catered to a professional clientele. They had different menus and different atmospheres, but the same high standards that built our reputation. Our financial reports showed that we were on track to pay off the loan early, with the profits funding an expansion into catering services that were eagerly snapped up by local companies. Success built confidence, which in turn bred more success. Standing at the podium at the Oakwood Chamber Luncheon to accept an award for business excellence, I thought about the journey from David's scornful laughter to this moment of community recognition. Vindication was sweeter than anything on our menu. "This is only the beginning," I told the applauding crowd. "Dreams don't have an expiration date, they have a start date." The evening news ran a story about us, holding us up as an inspiration for other seniors considering a late-in-life career change. I got calls from retirees all over the state asking for advice on how to pursue their own long-held ambitions. September came with a heat wave and unprecedented success. Both locations were running at full capacity, and we had more catering requests than we could handle. Staff meetings were about managing sustainable growth, not just survival. As I was reviewing financial reports in my office at the original Bistro, I saw a familiar figure in the corner booth. David was hunched over a cup of coffee, dressed in clothes that were much cheaper than his usual attire. He was staring at his hands, not at the business documents that had once made him so furious. How long had he been there? The familiar figure in the corner booth made Arthur's pen stop mid-sentence. David was hunched over a single cup of coffee, staring at his hands instead of the financial reports that had once enraged him. I put down my pen and took in my son's appearance. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by casual clothes that spoke of financial trouble. His shoulders were slumped in defeat, and his fingers nervously traced patterns on the tabletop. "David?" I stayed at my desk, letting him make the next move. "Dad." He glanced up for a second before looking back down at his coffee. "Busy as ever, I see." "A business needs attention." I gestured to the spreadsheets showing the revenue from both locations. "Success doesn't happen on its own." "No, I guess not." His voice had none of the arrogance from our last meeting. "Congratulations on the new place." "The downtown location looks great. You've seen it? It's hard to miss. Local senior builds restaurant empire." That's quite a headline. We sat in a tense silence as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows he had once threatened to take from me. The irony was not lost on either of us. "I was fired for trying to have you declared incompetent," he said, the words coming out as if he had rehearsed them. "A corporate investigation found that I had used company resources for a personal legal matter." I nodded. "Actions have consequences. 6 weeks with no paycheck. I'm behind on the mortgage, and the kids' school expenses are piling up. Sarah had to get a job after being a stay-at-home mom for years." Each confession seemed to take a physical toll on him. That's a tough spot to be in. I kept my tone neutral, offering neither pity nor judgment. I lost everything because of my own foolishness. David finally looked me in the eye. Everything I tried to protect from your reckless dreams is gone because I couldn't just let you live your life. The afternoon lull between the lunch and dinner rushes meant we were practically alone. Jessica was working quietly at the front counter, and Kevin was prepping for the evening service, both of them pretending not to listen. "You did the most damage to yourself," I said softly. "I just proved you were wrong about me." "You did more than prove me wrong. You built something incredible," he said, gesturing at the successful business around us. "Something I tried to tear down out of my own fear and need for control. Fear makes people do irrational things. Fear and pride." David's laugh was bitter. "I was so sure you were going to fail that I destroyed my own career trying to stop what turned out to be your greatest achievement." An unspoken request hung in the air between us. It was clear that David needed help. Whether he would ask for it, and what I would say if he did, remained to be seen. "The kids miss their grandfather," he said quietly. "They don't get why we don't visit anymore. Children shouldn't have to pay for their parents' mistakes. No, they shouldn't." David stood up slowly, his coffee untouched. "I should let you get back to work." He walked to the door but hesitated, looking back. His eyes were full of questions, unspoken pleas for forgiveness, for a job, for money, for all the things his pride wouldn't let him say out loud. I went back to my spreadsheets without offering him what he couldn't bring himself to ask for. 15 minutes later, the bell on the door chimed again. 15 minutes after David had left, the bell on the cafe door chimed again. Arthur knew without looking up from his paperwork that his son had come back to finish their conversation. "Dad." David's voice was heavy with resigned determination. Can we really talk?" I closed my financial reports and motioned to the chair opposite my desk. This time, he sat down instead of lingering by the door like a guilty child. "I need to ask you something." David's hands were trembling. "I know I don't have any right to after everything I did, but you need help." "Yes." The admission seemed to crush what little was left of his spirit. "Please give me a job. I'll wash dishes, work for minimum wage, take the night shift, whatever you have. I'm desperate." I looked at his face and saw, for the first time, genuine humility. The arrogant executive was gone, replaced by a desperate father paying the price for his own actions. "You want to work here? In the restaurant you called my suicide mission?" "I'll work anywhere you'll take me. I've learned about the food service industry from watching your success. I'm willing to learn any job that's out of the public eye. Why would I ever trust you?" I leaned back, savoring the shift in power. "You tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. You used the law as a weapon against your own father." "Because I was wrong about everything," David's voice cracked. "Wrong about you, wrong about this business, wrong about what family is supposed to be. Being wrong doesn't undo the harm you caused." "No, it doesn't," he said, looking down at his hands. But I was hoping for mercy. The afternoon shadows grew longer as I considered his request. Around us, the bistro operated with quiet efficiency. Clean dishes were stacked, fresh coffee was brewing, and prep for the next day had begun, all signs of the competence he had once so fiercely denied. "I can't forget what you did to me." My voice was steady, final. The legal threats, the public humiliation, the attempt to strip me of my independence and my dignity. "Dad, please. You called me a failure who would never amount to anything. You threatened to destroy everything I had worked for." I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the success he had tried to sabotage. "Now you know how it feels to be called a failure." David's shoulders slumped. "So you're saying no?" "I'm saying that justice has been served." I turned to face him. "You ruined your own career trying to ruin mine. You lost your financial stability trying to attack mine. The situation you're in now is entirely of your own making. What about forgiveness? What about family? Family loyalty is a two-way street. You showed me none when I needed you, so I will show you none now that you need me. David rose slowly, accepting what we both knew was a final decision. There would be no appeals, no second chances, no hope of reconciliation through a job or a loan. I understand, he said, his voice hollow but dignified. I brought this on myself. Yes, you did. He walked to the door one last time, pausing to look back at the thriving business he had once despised and now desperately needed. For what it's worth, I am truly proud of what you've done. That's worth very little, coming from you this late. David nodded and walked out into the September evening. I watched from the window as he got into his car, a much cheaper model than his old luxury sedan, another consequence of choices that had backfired. Standing alone in my successful bistro, surrounded by the tangible results of a dream I had achieved against all odds, I felt the deep satisfaction of justice, not revenge, but the simple, unalterable fact of consequences. Some wounds, especially those to a family's trust, can't be healed by apologies or desperation. The greatest failures are the ones we bring upon ourselves through our own pride and our disrespect for the dreams of others. The request was made, the answer was given, and justice was served.